The empty glass in Rowen's palm turned warm the instant Prince Aldwin Marr stepped into the circle, and it felt too much like another hand closing over hers. Silver nails had been driven into the library floor in a careful ring. Beyond them, the fire gave off little heat. Frost clung to the corners of the window panes. The portraits on the walls watched with faces rubbed blank, their gilt frames bright around nothing at all. "Is that part of the trade?" he asked. No client's sorrow had ever reached for her before she touched it. Rowen kept her fingers steady. Wealthy houses paid for that steadiness and the clean removal of what they no longer wished to carry. He set 2 fingers against the nearest nail, and the ward hum in the room fell soft at once. The silence left her ears ringing. It was a neat piece of power, done gently, and it cost him. Color thinned at his lips before he drew his hand back. A prince, then, who knew how to make space for another person's work. Rowen laid her tools on the small table between them. A score blade of clear glass, a shaping rod, 1 blank vessel cupped like a flower. "Tell me where it sits." Aldwin's mouth shifted, almost a smile and not one. "Here Yamyo said, touching the center of his chest. "It has sat there for years." Cold rode the air off him, but not the cold of weather. This was older. Winter shut inside a bone-deep place. Under it waited another note she could taste on the back of her tongue. Iron, rosewater, the sharp edge of tears held too long. Her blade passed 3 inches from his coat and caught on resistance. Grief, dense enough to score. She drew the line slowly, hearing the soft crystal cry that meant the feeling had agreed to come. Violet threaded out of the cut in the air. Not smoke, not light, something heavier. It poured into the vessel with the slow certainty of syrup, gathered itself, then shrank down further, denser, until a shard the size of her thumb lay in the glass cradle. Pale violet, clouded at the center. Far heavier than its size allowed. The prince had gone very still. Rowen lifted the cradle, expecting the usual draining pull of another person's sorrow. Instead, the shard turned toward her. A pulse struck her skin through the glass, once, then again. Not random, answering, the room tilted by a finger's width. "This is unfinished," she said. Aldwin did not look away from the shard. "Because of me?" "Because of me," she almost said, and the thought landed so hard she nearly lost hold of the cradle. Gum. From the wall behind him, a blank portrait gave back the firelight and nothing else. No face, no shoulders, no past. The emptiness of it made the skin at the base of her throat pull tight. "We have to seal it by hand," Rowen said. "Stay in the circle." Something low and dangerous gathered in her body when he stepped close again. Not because he was handsome. She refused to give herself the foolishness of that word. Because his grief had recognized her before his eyes had. Because his voice had already learned the shape of her name. The shard would not cool in the cradle. It kept taking on color from both of them, flushing deeper each time she tried to cap it. Rowen cursed under her breath, set the cradle aside, and lifted the bare glass with a cloth. "Hold my wrist," she said, "only if I tell you." His hand closed around her pulse with impossible care. The shard flared. Sound dropped out of the room. Her breath vanished. For one savage beat, she was elsewhere, frozen roses under moonlight, blood soaking through a white sleeve. Aldwin on his knees, with her body against him, and his mouth open on a grief so raw it had become a living thing. Then the library rushed back. The shard hit the table. Rowen staggered out of his grip and caught herself against the chair. Across from her, Aldwin's hand had reddened as though he had gripped iron left too long in flame. "What did you see?" he asked. "Too much, not enough." Her hands had begun to shake. The fire hissed behind them. Somewhere inside the walls, the palace wards gave one low, warning note. "I need air," Rowen said. Outside, the rose garden lay under a crust of old snow, every path edged in black stems and frozen thorns. The shard pulled at her pocket as she walked. Light thing, heavy tug. By the time she reached the stone bench at the garden's center, her shoulder ached from the drag of it. Footsteps followed a moment later, muffled by frost. He had not thrown a coat over his evening clothes. Cold silvered the ends of his hair. "You said unfinished." Rowen took out the shard. Dawn had not yet risen, but the winter sky gave enough light for the glass to answer. The pale center had shifted since the library. It no longer looked clouded. It looked shaped, not a face in full, only the turn of a cheek, the line of a mouth, hers. The knowledge struck clean. His grief was for her. The garden smelled of old earth and ruined sweetness, roses asleep under ice. "I know that look," Aldwin said softly. She almost laughed. "Do you?" His throat moved. "I have been living inside it." The shard throbbed between her fingers. Rowen stared at his mouth because looking at his eyes felt too much like stepping off a ledge. "I don't remember you," she said. Aldwin did not flinch. That hurt more than if he had. Frost gave a sharp little crack under her boot as she moved closer without deciding to. One step, then another. He stayed where he was. He would let her come or leave. He would not take the choice from her. Then why? She asked, voice roughened by cold and something else. "Does your grief know my pulse?" He answered by holding out his burned hand. Careful, always careful. Rowen put the shard into her left palm and lifted her right to his face. She meant to prove something simple and practical, that skin was only skin, that memory was not hiding in the line of a jaw or the place below an ear. His cheek met her hand, and every thought in her went white. His breath changed, her own followed. The shard in her other hand throbbed hard enough to hurt, and she knew with a wild bodily certainty that if she leaned the last inch, if she set her mouth to his, the world would answer. She did not get the chance. The garden woke like struck glass. Cold burst upward through the stone. Roses snapped in their frozen beds. Violet light ran under Rowen's skin and threw her back into another memory. This same path in spring, mud on the hem of her dress, Aldwin pressing her against the old yew with one hand at her waist, and a laugh breaking from him when she kissed him first. Then pain, a tearing pain, a hand not his dragging her backward through light. She fell to one knee in the snow. Aldwin dropped with her, not touching, not yet. His breath came short now, visible and hard. Frost had climbed the cuff of his coat and glazed the veins at his wrist. "Enough," he said, though the words sounded like it cost him. "Where is your workshop?" Across the city, above a narrow lane, Rowen kept her trade in a room lined floor to ceiling with bottled feeling. Glass slept on every shelf, amber for fear, green for envy, gray for shame. One blue vessel near the window held a sorrow so old she had forgotten the client and kept the bottle because throwing it out had felt cruel. Tonight, each one of them answered when she crossed the threshold with the violet shard in her pocket. A hum rose through the room, not loud, intimate, like someone trying not to sob in the next chamber. The furnace at the back had gone cold hours earlier, but when Aldwin stepped inside, heat licked awake under its grate. Rowen set her satchel on the work table. "Do not touch anything. I have no plan to. That should have been dry." It landed closer to Tired. He stood just inside the door, taking in the shelves, the sleeping colors, the cut glass tools laid in their rows. The prince looked too large for the room, too formal, too necessary. The shard would not leave her hand now. When she tried to set it down, it rolled back toward her palm. When she wrapped it in cloth, the cloth slipped loose. "It needs finishing," she said. "If it stays half-made, it will start taking shape from anything near it." As though in answer, 3 bottles on the shelf nearest Aldwin chimed. He looked at the sound, then at her, and near us? Rowen did not answer. She set a fresh ring of salt around the work table instead, laid the shard on a square of black velvet, and reached for the shaping rod, too close. He had to stand too close for the tool to work. The shard kept dimming whenever he stepped beyond arm's length, then brightening the moment the distance closed again. "Behind me," she said. Aldwin moved to the other side of the table and came around. The shift of him brushed her back before he ever touched her. She felt it through her coat, through the cold room, through nerves already rubbed raw. The rod shook once in her grip. "If it goes bright, pass your hand over mine." "Only over, not on." He made a sound that might have been a scent. Glass sang under the rod's edge. Rowen turned the shard, coaxing it thinner, trying to open a seam where the grief could settle without reaching for her. The shelves began to hum louder. A pulse struck between her shoulder blades. Aldwin's hand hovered over hers, close enough that she felt the shape of it without contact. His breath touched the side of her neck. Not quite a touch. Worse. The shard split itself open. Every bottle in the room answered at once. Sound flooded the workshop, muffled crying, laughter cut short, the low animal noise of panic. All the feelings she had caged over years trembling loose in their glass homes. Hairline fractures raced through 2 green bottles and 1 blue. Violet spilled under the salt ring in a fast-moving line. Rowen slammed both palms to the table. Pain shot into her wrists. Back. Aldwin did not move. The word came again, sharper. Back. He still did not move. Instead, he lowered his hand the final inch and braced her shaking fingers with 2 of his own. The room shuddered, then held, only for a breath, long enough to prove the truth. This grief would not sit in a bottle. It would not behave like any other burden she had sold relief from. The shelves quieted slowly. A crack still ran down the side of the old blue vessel near the window. "It gets worse each time," Rowen said. "Yes," Aldwin said, "and we both know why." Rowen drew the bolts on the door, shut the furnace, and lowered the workshop wards until the room felt bare as skin. No hum, no spell noise. The glass on the shelves went quiet all at once, the silence after it pressed close, intimate as breath. She could hear cloth shift when Aldwin moved, the small, stubborn ping of cooling metal inside the dead furnace. Her own pulse, no longer hidden by magic. Memory had always been a locked room in her mind. Now it pressed from the other side, fist to wood. She took off her gloves one finger at a time and laid them by the furnace. Without them, the room felt sharper, more honest. "I woke at 22 in a boarding house on Fenn Street," she said. "One room, no papers, no family name on anything except the one in my own mouth. I knew this trade as if someone had folded the knowledge into my hands while I slept. The black velvet under the shard darkened by another shade. I found work. I learned not to ask where I had been before that morning." Her fingers closed once, then opened again on the table. "It was easier to sell other people relief than to wonder why I had been left empty." Across from her, Aldwin's hand left the table edge. Not from recoil, as if he had to stop himself from reaching for her without permission. The restraint hurt to watch. When he spoke, his voice had gone rough around the edges. "When you walked into my library, the palace wards lurched." Rowen looked up. "They knew you," he said, "or what remained of you inside them." The violet shard gave one slow pulse. Cold worked its way into her knees, then her teeth. "Say it plain." On the table between them, the shard held the first light of dawn, like trapped dusk. "My house has been in mourning for years," Aldwin said. "No one can say for whom. The staff lose the word before it leaves their mouths. The portraits go blank when a painter tries to restore them. I remember the grief, the habits of loving someone, the way my body still turns toward doors expecting you. If I force your face into memory, pain follows." The workshop stayed stripped and still around them. No wards, no hum. Only truth and what their bodies did with it. "Who was I to you?" she asked, his hand closed on the table edge. Not hard, carefully, as if the wood might split under less than the full truth. "You were the woman I chose," he said. "You chose me back. We had a winter house full of roses that hated the season and bloomed anyway because you liked proving gardeners wrong. We had a library you claimed as much as I did. You bound glass for memory, not grief. Then you died." The last two words did not rise. He did not make them dramatic. He gave them to her like something breakable. Rowen stared at him and heard, absurdly clear, the drip of thaw from a gutter outside. "How?" Aldwin's mouth tightened. "There was a spell left over from the war. It fed on memory. You found a way to hold part of it in glass, to keep it from taking everyone at once." The shard warmed. Her scars, the two faint white lines on her left palm, old enough that she no longer saw them, began to sting. "It still took too much from you," he said. "After you died, someone kinder than wise tore that life apart where they could. They pulled you free of it and gave you another start." His hand loosened on the table edge. "The cost stayed here," he said. "Blank portraits, broken names, a grief that never found its body. No flourish, no plea. Just the room, the glass, the sound of a man reaching the end of his strength. Rowen put 2 fingers against her own mouth, because it had begun to tremble. There was the cost, plain and ugly, not a tale, not a curse she could admire from a distance, her own absence living in front of her. "I would rather know," she said. Aldwin shut his eyes once. When he opened them, something inside his face had given way, not into ruin, into honesty. "If knowing takes you from me again, I would rather you did not." The words landed low in her body, below speech. He would let her go to keep her alive. He would choose her life over his chance to be remembered. That, more than the grief, made belief possible. Dawn paled the window to a color like watered milk. On the work table, the violet shard had begun to show 2 edges at once. One held dark, one held light. Rowen had seen choice glass only twice in her life, and never on anything this small. It formed when a feeling had been forced so long it split around decision. "No more delay," she said. The hammer hung on its hook by the furnace. Short-handled, iron head, the safe answer in most rooms. Her tongue went dry when she took it down. Aldwin did not cross the salt ring. He did not tell her to be brave. He did not tell her love was worth dying for. He only watched her with that terrible steadiness, as if he meant to witness whatever she chose and bear it cleanly. Rowen set the hammer beside the shard and touched the iron first. The workshop vanished. She saw Aldwin months from now in the same library, standing before one of the blank portraits with a stack of state papers under his arm. His shoulders were looser, his mouth rested easier. Relief had done its work. When a dark-haired woman passed the open door, he looked up with simple politeness, and nothing tore inside him. Nothing reached. He was lighter. He was alone. He lived. The vision released her. She touched the violet glass with one fingertip. This time the memory came from inside her own bones. Frozen roses, blood at the corner of her mouth. Aldwin's hands uselessly warm against a wound no heat could mend. Not because he had failed, because she had tried to carry all the grief herself. Hold it, contain it, spare him, spare everyone. That had been the death, not memory alone. Solitude wearing the mask of mercy, the choice sharpened. Break the shard, and he would walk clean into a life where she had never existed. Swallow it, and the old road would open under her feet once more, unless she did the one thing she had not done before. Share it. The hammer handle fit her grip too well. For a breath she lifted it. Iron caught the first line of dawn. Her arm shook from shoulder to wrist. Safe. That was the shape of it. A clean strike. His life. Her absence. No more trembling when he said her name. Aldwin spoke then, low enough that the room had to lean to hear. "Rowen, not Prince, not your Highness, not some lost knight she could not bear. Only the one she had now, the one she had made with empty hands and surviving." The hammer lowered by an inch. Another sound followed his voice, the smallest catch in his breathing. Not theatrical, not chosen, the body giving itself away. Safety without him was a room she had already lived in. "No," Rowen said, though she was not sure whether the word belonged to the hammer, the old spell, or the long blank years. She set the iron aside. The shard lay in her palm, heavy as a vow. Cold struck first when she pressed it to her tongue. Then sweetness, faint and wrong. Glass softened, melted. Violet ran down her throat like winter water, and fire in the same swallow. Pain knifed through her. The shelves screamed. Every bottle in the workshop flashed once. Hard enough to blind. Rowen hit the floor on one hand. Memory tore open above her. Spring rain on the library steps. Aldwin asleep over a book. With ink on his fingers, roses in snow, the first pane of memory glass they had ever made together. Then the older memory rose under all of it. The death, not noble, not neat, her alone with too much grief inside her, refusing help because love had made a martyr of her instead of a partner. Hands closed around hers. No backlash came. Aldwin had crossed the salt ring. He was kneeling in the broken chalk, one hand under her nape, the other locked around her fingers. Warmth flooded the place where the pain had split her open. Not fixing, not taking, joining. The bottles went dark. One by one, every stored feeling in the room fell silent. Not dead, emptied of her old power over them. The trade she had lived by for 7 years slipped away, so gently it hurt more than if it had been torn free. Rowen drew a breath that felt entirely her own. Between their joined palms, something cool formed. A pane no larger than a playing card slid into existence against their skin. Clear glass, almost weightless, with the last trace of violet moving inside it like a single thread of smoke under water. The workshop held still. Loss came first. She reached, out of habit, for the hum that always lived in her fingertips when a feeling sought shaping. Nothing answered. Her hands were only hands now, scarred, clever, emptied of that old theft. The grief of it sat plain in her mouth. Aldwin saw. She knew he saw because his face changed, and not toward triumph, toward sorrow for her, toward care sharpened by the fact that he could not repair what had been paid. Rowen. This time she turned into the sound. His hand rose slowly, giving her room to stop him. When his knuckles touched her cheek, there was no frost, no ward, no violence from the air. Only skin, warm, human, astonishing. Relief took her under so fast she almost laughed. She covered his hand with hers, leaned forward the bare inch that had once been forbidden. His mouth met hers on a breath, then another, and the kiss felt less like hunger than release, all the locked doors in her body opening at once. His other hand found her waist. Her fingers went into his coat, bunching the fabric there. Close, closer. The room narrowing to that single point where they touched and nothing punished it. When they parted, the clear pane between them brightened. A memory appeared inside the glass, not stealing either of them into it, offering. Snow at the workshop window, their older selves bent over a table much like this one, Aldwin holding a rose stem while she sealed it into clear glass with laughing concentration. Shared, whole, bearable. Rowen stared. The pain changed again, not to another old life this time, to now, their joined hands, his thumb rough with burn and chalk dust, her palm scarred and open. "We made memory glass," she said, voice unsteady from more than the kiss. "Not prisons." Aldwin looked from the pain to her face. Wonder broke over his control with almost boyish force. "Can we again?" Morning found them still in the workshop, the broken salt underfoot, and dawn laid pale across the table. A single frozen rose petal, fallen from her coat hem after the garden, rested near the clear pane. Rowen set it between two fresh sheets of glass. Aldwin steadied the frame while she sealed the edges with a flame no longer hers alone. The pane took the petal gently, held it. Beside it, on the work table bright with morning, two fresh sheets of glass waited under their joined hands.